I just realized yesterday that it's almost February, so I am trying to deal with that shock. That said, some of our week 3 materials come together in a way that is telling a story about the Harlem Renaissance, and I want to cover some of those main points to give everyone a good idea of how art can change culture or change ideas about race. So I'm going backwards here, and I'm starting with a week 3 reading, which is Langston Hughes' essay, Negro Art in the Racial Mountain. And what happens in that essay is a response to George Schuyler, the editor of the Pittsburgh Courier, an historically black newspaper, who questions, as it says here, the need for a separate African American artistic and literary tradition. Now, this issue between Hughes and Schuyler speaks to the issue of newness, or Alan Locke's idea of the new Negro, with the Jazz Age or the Harlem Renaissance or modernity in the 1920s, signaling a radical break from past racial roles and identities in the United States, among other things. So, one of the disparaging comments that Hughes makes in the essay toward Schuyler is, "Be respectable, write about nice people, show how good we are," say the Negroes. "Be stereotyped, don't go too far. Don't shatter our illusions about you. Don't amuse us too seriously. We will pay you," say the whites. So this conflict that Hughes expresses, even though he has a white patron who very much tells him what to do, is the conflict between addressing the so-called race problem, or as it was called in the earlier time period from emancipation in 1865 up until first Sutton Griggs in 1899 and then Alan Locke in 1925 used the term. It's the problem of, or it's a question of, or some, to a certain extent, a conflict of the race problem versus the identity of the new Negro. And that is something that we talked about in the week 2 conversation, especially about Sutton Griggs. So when we look at the Griggs excerpt, the annotations that you can look at in the OneDrive link point out that the narrator of the story has a somewhat disparaging attitude toward the character Belton, even though even though Belton very much believes in be happy, show good things, don't surprise us too much with stereotypes. Belton kind of seems to buy into the sarcastic promise that Hughes makes in his response to Schuyler, which is, keep the white people happy, don't shake things up too much. But then later in this chapter, Belton, who initially is somewhat of an object of scorn and ridicule in the tone of the narrator of this novel, carries on an insurrection and brings about a moment that I would call a fear of a black planet moment. Of course, that's Public Enemy, 1991. But moving forward a little bit, Belton is thinking about the future of the race and the equality of the races, which are uplift terms. And here we have an irony that Belton has to play into a stereotype by hiding into a chicken coop. The race that dreams of freedom is put down as a race of chicken thieves. However, Belton becomes more interesting to the narrator as he starts to defy the biggest rule of the Old South, not to create combinations, not to have meetings of black people that are secret, and not to protest or start an insurrection. And Belton essentially starts a protest at his school. And the narrator says, rather admiringly now, the president fell back aghast, and the white teachers were all struck dumb with fear. They had not dreamed that a combination of their pupils was possible. So now Belton becomes more heroic because he is breaking with the past and he is shocking people and he is defying the rules of the middle class in his actions. So I'm moving through this kind of quickly because I think long videos are very boring, but there's also in week 2